So, welcome to the BCMA panel, Delivering Value with Creativity. I'm Andrew Cantor. I'm the Global CEO of the Branded Content Marketing Association, or BCMA. We're a global member organisation that focuses on best practice in helping our members to create the best branded content. Today, across the world, we've collectively been experiencing a huge crisis, which is not discriminated. When so many business sectors have suffered as a result of COVID-19, marketing has been adversely affected. Budgets have been slashed as uncertainty has reigned. And at the same time, for those who haven't withdrawn altogether, brand messaging has felt like a tightrope for most, bringing in a huge challenge of striking the right tone whilst putting out compelling content. Any brand message that could be seen to be exploiting the current situation has been met with negative consumer sentiment that could cause long-term damage to brand equity. At the same time, many of the traditional ways of creating marketing content, such as production, have been severely restricted during the lockdown period. But several notable brands have pivoted to practically help, from manufacturing hand sanitizer to donating free or discounted food to health and key workers. These initiatives have been rightly applauded. But which brands have gone further in a way that's likely to make a long-term and positive impact? So today we've brought together a panel of experts from across the BCMA professional network to share their views on how brands, agencies, platforms and producers should adapt and emerge positively going forward. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves and explain what they do, and then tell us something we don't know about them. So I'm going to start with Nina. So over to you, Nina.
Yeah, hi. My name is Nina Jacobsen, and I am one of the founders of Bytes.com. Bytes is a streaming platform for branded entertainment and brand film. And I run the daily office in Copenhagen together with my partner. One of the things you probably don't know about me is I'm a Danish champion of gymnastics. So sometimes when we need to clear our heads, we stand on our hands, I guess.
Fantastic. Okay, Gina, what about yourself?
Hi, I'm Gina Rowan. I am Global Content Director at an agency called Cedar. We're a global agency based in London, Hong Kong, Cape Town and Madrid. The thing you probably don't know about me is that I played drums in various bands during my high school and university years, namely a punk band called K-Grind.
Wow.
So like Nina, when stress takes over, it's very handy to have that as a skill in your back pocket.
Excellent. So you might be able to give us a tune later on, or do some drumming. Fantastic.
On the teacups.
What about yourself, Mark?
I'm Mark Thompson. I'm Commercial Director and Head of Advertising at ITN Productions, which is the creative and commercial arm of ITN that produce obviously the ITV, Channel 4 and Channel 5 news. Along with that, the probably thing you don't know about me, but you probably could tell by my background, I am also in a couple of bands. And when I was probably about 10 years ago, I was also an actor, and I won the BBC Acting Up talent search, which meant that I appeared on Doctors, among other BBC dramas.
Oh, wow.
So there you go. So
there we go.
Crime Watch.
Fantastic.
So maybe we can have a little bit of a jam later, Gina.
Sounds like a plan. And last by no means least, Dave, what about yourself?
Going last is the worst thing to have to do with this. I'm Dave Roberts. I'm Chief Content Officer at Engine. Engine is a mid-sized marketing group, independent group based in London. We work with clients such as Santander, Sky, Jägermeister, so big global clients, and I particularly look after the content offering across the business. Now I've got to think of something interesting to say about myself. I was going to lie, but I've decided not to lie. I represented Wales at basketball in Russia once, which for a small guy is pretty impressive. We did come last, so it's not a huge claim to fame, but yeah, that's probably my thing you don't know about me.
Wow. I probably like to know the backstory to that, but we probably don't have time to do that.
Yeah, we had to leave the country. It's a long story.
Fantastic. Well, thank you guys. That's great to have the introduction. And, you know, I think the really, you know, great thing we have here is we have, you guys are from different parts of the branded content industry and the sector. So it's about hearing different voices. So, you know, today we want to talk about you know, how can we deliver that value through creativity for brands? So, you know, I'm going to ask Nina to kick off and just to give her sort of perspective from, you know, the platform side of the industry, and how you believe that we should be looking at the delivery of value. So let's start with that.
Yes, as Andrew says, I work within the distribution part of the value chain. And I think one of the things that's become most obvious during this crisis is the fact that people are now taking the time to actually sit down and watch branded content. I mean, we've never had better view times and view numbers. And I think there's a change in sentiment. I always think there was a big audience for branded entertainment if they were served in the right way. But definitely now we can see that slow movies, you know, companies taking their time to tell their story actually has a big audience at the moment, because I think in society all of us kind of slowed down over the last 6 months, became more reflective and perhaps also more responsive to different storytelling and different messages. So I think one of the things you can do with creativity now is actually let loose some of the ideas you've had, but maybe you've held back on because you've always been told to go short and go quick. I think actually there's a tendency now that you have an opportunity to do the opposite.
That's a really good point. I mean, you know, we've seen some extraordinary examples. I mean, particularly the Audi 4-hour branded content story. I mean, that's just quite amazing. So, you know, some brands are kind of, you know, that's probably stretching it a bit. But Gina, from your perspective, obviously you're in the sort of publishing area, digital publishing with Cedar. You know, what is the sort of general feeling at the moment about how, you know, how are you delivering that value through your creativity?
Well, I think to echo Nina, we've seen people paying a lot more attention to content. We're seeing longer dwell times across the board. We're seeing huge spikes in readership of our print products, massive increase in traffic to the websites we produce. But from a client perspective, we've seen a lot more openness to experimentation, to test and learn. There's been a lot more quicker sign-offs, a lot more excitement around innovation, and just really starting to test this new landscape we're in and this new audience kind of appreciation for content. The going down the content wormholes has become a bigger focus for us. I'd say content distribution has been the biggest pivot for us during the last 6 months. We've seen entire offline events now recreated as online events. We've you know, press events that in the past we would produce a big print product for, we've now actually produced videos and a whole kind of experience for the target audience. From a print perspective, obviously we work a lot in travel. Some of those, you know, onboard magazines have just, you know, it's not been a thing anymore. Mm-hmm. And we've absolutely digitally transformed some of those, you know, heritage names into an online experience. So the mm-hmm. distribution of content has seen a huge shift during the last 6 months in particular.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I mean, obviously you work with some big brands like Tesco's as well. I mean, obviously they've had to really adapt. And I think adaptation is, you know, and adapting to this area is a really pivotal point, because, you know, like in any, you know, industry, if you don't adapt, you don't survive. So Mark, what about from sort of the more sort of production focused aspect? I mean, what are you hearing really from brands and the content creation? Because I know we've talked about, you know, you said there's maybe a little bit more of a drive towards AFP or ad funded programming that you've been looking at. So what's the sort of view from the sort of the production side of the business?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, you know, creativity is key for everything. It's something we do, but it's not our kind of main bag. Our main bag is production, being ITN. So we kind of bring creative production solutions as well to our clients, which is pretty much, I mean, as John Hegarty said, it's 80% idea, 80% execution. And I think 80% execution part is quite key in terms of not only realising the creative, but also understanding the objectives of the client and managing to do it within a budget. And obviously budgets are quite tight at the moment. So for us, it's about coming up with creative production solutions that allow our clients to get the best out of the creative that's in front of them, whilst not jeopardising any of the kind of production quality or anything that the agencies have come to us for. So we've allowed more in our post-production. So already we've got a huge kind of post-production facility and setup at ITN. That's actually working at triple its capacity at the minute. We've got remote post-production going on all over Europe and throughout the UK. We've created various different infrastructures using innovative technology to do remote broadcasting, remote production, allowing clients from all over the world really to be able to feedback and see talents and contributors on set and talk to directors and give feedback pretty much in a real-time manner. Mm-hmm. So that's what we kind of bring into it from a creative point of view, I suppose. It's more like creative production solution, I suppose. But on top of that, we've got, and kind of, I suppose, segueing into that AFP side of it, we've also got quite a big TV division at ITN. So we make, I think this year alone, we've made 700 hours of content for Channel 5 alone, just in TV programming. So it's a pretty big operation. We've got pitches and meetings with probably 6 or 7, maybe 8 commissioners every single week, providing ideas. So we really understand what audiences want from a commissioner's point of view. And then we're able to kind of almost feed that into brands, and if there's any particular ideas that need deficit funding, especially now from commissioners, that's what we can probably add.
Okay, so that's great. So I think we'll hear from Dave, and then maybe we'll come back and talk about the commissioning process, because I think that's a really interesting point, an area we can talk about from a brand perspective. So Dave, what about from the agency side of the business? What are you seeing in terms of how clients are reacting in this new world of creativity?
Well, it's interesting. I think that sort of ties back to the question on value, and I would actually approach the question on value slightly differently, because I think when you were posing that question, you were coming at from a point of view of delivering value to clients. I think actually, considering the context of us talking about branded content, actually what we have the ability to do, and what I think a lot of clients are looking to do, and audiences are definitely seeking out, is understanding how brands can deliver that value to them. So how actually that value exchange subtly shifts, because fundamentally the advertising value exchange is built on the premise that I kind of will accept you interrupting me because I understand that this broadcaster or this publisher needs that revenue. And obviously there are multiple threats to that these days, whether that be in terms of ad blocking, whether that be any other technological or even sort of wider cultural shift. And so actually what branded content does, and the way we talk about it, is actually delivering value beyond the message. So, where normally advertising is based on product attribute, product benefit type messaging, obviously there's a much broader world that we can move into when we're just dealing with entertainment-based content. And I think what COVID's done, which is really fascinating, is it's actually forced brands to really, really put the audience first. I think there's been such a ubiquitous awareness of the fact that everybody's going through this experience globally, this same experience. It suddenly has forced that agenda, that actually it's not enough to just think about my brand, my product, what I want to say. Suddenly that importance of actually thinking about the audience and about how a brand can actually drive tangible value for that audience, whether that be through information, through education, or through just entertainment, that's never been more important. And I think my big hope is that as we come out, hopefully, of this period, that actually we don't then regress back to that world where we're much more insular, much more introspective as brands, and we actually remember what we delivered to audiences, and really the massive impact that had. And I think all the great examples of what we've seen creatively over the last few months have all had that at their heart. They've all understood that value exchange, that in order for an audience to spend time with that brand, there has to be that reward, there has to be that tangible benefit that you deliver.
Exactly, and I think that's an excellent point. I mean, it's almost like saying brands need to be entertainers, and that's really, but in a way that's genuine, relevant, and true to their sort of, objectives in that respect.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
when we talk about commissioning, Mark, maybe, there's been a view really that commissioners have steered away from having any, commercial partners coming in, because it can affect the editorial control, etc. But do you think there's now, with what's been happening over the last few months, and also the switch really to more on-demand content through Netflix and Amazon Prime and Disney Plus, is that there's now a realization that they do need to have more commercial relationships with brands. They need to fund production. Do you feel that changing at all?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's some broadcasters more than others who've embraced that, definitely. And it is something, it's an opportunity really. I mean, the commissioners are, they're up against it, they're under pressure like everybody is really, and their budgets are smaller than they are. Plus you've got production that can't or can no longer go ahead for obviously COVID reasons. So there's different pressures that we need to find a way around it. And it's a fantastic opportunity for brands to almost step in and be a part of that. The one thing that they have to understand though is that there is a certain process in place to do that. And it's not a case that brands or agencies can suddenly come up with the next British Bake Off and try and sell it into Channel 4, because that probably won't happen. It has to happen the other way around. Commissioners have to like the idea, sign off the idea first, and then almost backtrack it in a way. So, I mean, it worked really well, and there's been some fantastic AFPs that have come out. Even during lockdown, there was I think Celebs Go Virtual Dating, I think, that was on Channel 4, I think it was.
Yeah.
That was brought to you by Extra, the chewing gum, which kind of, so the brands, they, as long as the brands mix quite well into the editorial or the idea of the AFP, then it works quite well. But even if it doesn't, and as long as there's some link into it, and it doesn't seem totally incongruous, then it can work really well, because from those AFPs, then it's almost like a signpost to other content that you can do, spin-offs of other shows, other branded content, longer form stuff, podcasts,
Exactly.
those kind of things.
I mean, and also that kind of moving on to looking at the sort of, we're all in this very short-term perspective. A lot of brands, are not looking at the longer-term views. And I think, Nina, you've mentioned before about evergreen content, and I think that's, it's really even more important now to think about how branded content and what you were talking about, Mark, is that, this can be something that can be a long-term solution, rather than just a very much, we're just going to do this and that's it. Because, and Gina's point is that, I think it's really important that, there has to look at the return on investment, but I think it's about the testing and learning, which is, I think it's really great that brands are looking to do that, and we should encourage them to do that more. So I guess the balance really is that, a lot of businesses are looking at, I need to retain my staff, I need to, pay the furlough scheme or whatever it is across the world is going to end in, this end of this month. And, I suppose the pressure really is that marketing is normally the first thing that takes the hit, because it's normally the biggest amount of money that you can get back straight away. So I guess, what can we do as an industry to encourage that? I mean, from what I'm hearing from Mark, it might be more of about an educational job to say, look at the benefits, look at the potential return on investment, look at the effectiveness this can bring. I think probably we need to do more of that. And, maybe, Gina, from your point of view, how do you look at the whole evaluation and the effectiveness side of things?
Well, it's been really interesting in terms of not only have we had to adopt creativity in terms of process and the way we work, in terms of the type of content we're putting out, but also in terms of the insights that we're gathering. We've had to move from, say, weekly or monthly reports and insights to play back to the client the value of the content, to kind of daily, really being extremely agile around what customers are searching for, particularly in the food space around Tesco. It's banana bread today, it's sourdough tomorrow, and, really pivoting and creating content around that meets that audience need. But then there's also the need to show brands such as Tesco. I mean, we've always had a commercial team there for our travel and Lux portfolio, the likes of Eurostar, British Airways, etc. But we've really been working closer with Tesco on how to commercialize their content, developing a whole kind of sponsored content program to show them that when you have this rich archive of content, recipes, food content, how-tos, all that kind of valuable content that people are searching for on an evergreen basis, how can you repackage it and then also sell it to third parties and you know, do that kind of sponsored program that really delivers that ROI on an always-on basis as well. So there's kind of creativity from different, you know, angles in terms of how we work with them, how quickly we put it out, but also how we commercialize it and how we show them the value ongoing of this content that they're sitting on. It's an evergreen tool and source of kind of customer loyalty and that kind of long tail to build long-term brand trust, but it's also kind of a revenue opportunity as well.
Mm-hmm. And Dave, from your client's perspective, what are you know, what's the sort of general feeling in terms of the longer term view? I mean, how are you, you know, looking at selling that through to clients?
Well, I think, you know, obviously there's an enormous amount of data which proves that brands that invest through challenging periods, you know, certainly come out better in the long term. Particularly, you know, as you see that, you know, media costs in some certain channels might be falling, and therefore actually you can over-invest in generating a huge share of voice, or a larger share of voice than your competitors. So, you know, I think there's a lot of evidence to prove that actually spending through this is the right thing to do. I think certainly from a content point of view, depending on, I mean, we've talked a lot about AV and film, and Mark's talked a lot about AFP, but obviously there's an enormous array of media and channels open to us. So, you know, certainly what a lot of content has at its heart is a certain agility, perhaps is a lower cost investment from a production point of view than it might be for a traditional above the line advertising. So there are certain things that content naturally gravitates towards and offers clients these new different opportunities. And obviously, you know, in terms of proving effectiveness, you know, we now have such a wealth of data at our fingertips that actually proving that effectiveness is actually easier than it's ever been before. Still, don't get me wrong, still difficult, I think, because a lot of those effectiveness tools are still driven by or were originated in tracking above the line. So not all perfect when it comes to branded content, but certainly, you know, it feels like this really should be content's time, as I said before, whether that's in terms of the new value exchange or whether it's just in terms of some of the practicalities and the pragmatics of actually creating this and getting this out there.
Mm-hmm. What about yourself, you know, Nina, from the platform perspective? Is it more about, you know, an engaged audience now that is very much seeking out that content? Because, you know, rather than wanting to be interrupted, it's about choosing stuff that they engage with. Are you seeing more of that now?
Oh yes, definitely. But we've seen that all along. I mean, basically, the longer the content is, the better the film performs every time. It's just sort of a different scenery than we see then on social media. I mean, the longer content performs the best on our platform every time. And also, it's not necessarily the most expensive productions. I mean, I think what COVID has done actually is release a lot of creativity in the creative teams, both within brands and in agencies, because they have more limited budgets now. They're forced to think outside the box in a new and different way. And picking up on something Mark said, I think also on our platform, we can see the more content looks like something you'd find on broadcast. You know, do you have a hero and a villain, or do you have, you know, a recognizable story format? You'll stick to it. It doesn't necessarily have to be the biggest budget. It could be a sort of a small budget, but a really good story, just within a frame that you recognize. These kinds of formats are really popular, and I think they would work, or they are working very well at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny, I was just going to jump in there. Talking about regular formats, and the audiences love familiarity, and already I've watched 2 programs, Forged in Fire and something which is basically Bake Off with big knives and swords. And then there's another thing on Netflix at the minute called US Barbecuing that I was watching last night, which is basically Bake Off with a load of Americans barbecuing lots of meat, and it's fantastic and brilliant. But straight away I knew exactly what I was watching when I watched it. I knew exactly what I was watching before I even turned it on, and it's exactly what I need. And so, yeah, absolutely agree with Nina's point there, that people like that familiarity of format.
Do you think sorry, Gina, go on.
Sorry, I would just echo both of those sentiments. We've seen the same. more than ever, the franchises of content that we develop for, particularly in the print kind of products we do, those are really gaining traction, where people are, you know, trust is at an all-time low. If they know those trusted formats are coming back month in, month out, it's something that they can rely on and something they look forward to, and it does drive, again, that brand loyalty.
Yeah, I think it makes people feel warm and already part of something, even though they're not yet part of it. They can already kind of like recognize themselves in it almost.
Yeah, and I think there's a golden opportunity actually for brands to become experts rather than advertisers at the moment, because it's a bit more quiet in the digital space, and because, you know, you actually have the audience time frame, which is a lot wider than it used to be. People actually sit down and watch your content, and you can position yourself as an expert where people go to for advice and for entertainment rather than just an advertiser of something. And I think that expert position is wide open at the moment, and the brand should really try and go for that.
So there's a real opportunity for, you know, we've always thought, you know, brands are really the new commissioners, because, you know, they are in a position now to take advantage of this. And, you know, a lot of them are already looking at taking their creativity in-house. Certain major brands have been doing that. But I think it's working in partnership. I think, you know, working collaboratively, like, you know, Mark was saying, you know, familiarity is a really key element of, you know, we all want something that is familiar, and certainly in difficult times, we tend to gravitate towards the stuff that we know and love. So, you know, I mean, that may be an emerging trend, but what other trends have you seen over the last few months that you think are, you know, significant in terms of how that could translate going forward? Anything specifically?
From our perspective, I think what Nina was saying there about experts is absolutely critical, and particularly with Tesco, we're seeing a move towards actually surfacing more of their internal experts as well, their product development managers and their chefs, and how can we turn them into media personalities? How can we, you know, create really engaging content with people who are not necessarily celebrities or influencers, as well as, you know, looking to the wider influencer set, and how can we turn them into more personalities? I think people, you know, we're all isolated at the moment. I think people are craving that human touch. So actually adding a bit more personality to some of the more kind of practical content, like recipes, how-tos, that kind of stuff, which Tesco traditionally haven't really done. But through their Above the Line have seen huge success through their Food Love Stories campaign. They're seeing that desire for that human touch, real human stories at the heart of content, even if it is practical kind of content.
Exactly. And I think, you know, talking brands, I mean, we were talking earlier about, you know, which brands have really taken this on board. I mean, through the BCMA, we ran a whole series of the Global Lockdown Showcase, Content Showcase, which took the view of all our global chapters to put up their top 5 campaigns. We had over 50 entries in the end, and we've had, you know, thousands of votes coming through, and it's amazing to see the different types of creativity and how people have adapted around the world, which is absolutely fascinating. But, you know, I think Nina, you had an example you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, it's actually it's from the Danish market where I'm at the moment, but it's actually the GSK who created a mini series. Like Mark says, it was completely recognizable format. It was a biker club who had to quit smoking. Very untraditional setting for a GSK show, but it was really great, and it was really funny, and, you know, they're crying and whining, and it's terrible, and some of them end up quitting smoking and some don't. It was really great entertainment and a great scene setting. But I think in terms of trends, picking up with something I think Dave said about agility, I think keeping an agile production mind and distribution mind at the moment is quite important. Knowing that, you know, you have some sort of topic or area you want to communicate within, but also accepting the fact you may not know exactly how you'll be communicating in December. You know, perhaps, I mean, maybe production should be sort of in a shorter sprints at the moment. And, you know, and I feel that people are a bit more open to sort of, also, as you said, Gina, test things out. So, you know, you have a theme going on for the next 12 months, but just exactly how that theme is going to play out in production, maybe you should just figure that out along the way, depending on what's happening in the world situation and in the different markets.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You've got to build in flexibility, you know, and I think that's really important. But, you know, you've got to take a a longer term view, but also short, medium, and long term is maybe how you should look at it. What about you, Dave? Any examples that jump out? You're probably going to say Jägermeister, aren't you?
Yeah, I was, funnily enough. No, so I mean, I think maybe
it's a bit early for that, Dave, I think.
It's never too early. No, it is too early. If anyone's watching, it is too early sometimes. No, it's something that does link into what Nina was saying, and also your point about short, medium, and long term. So during lockdown, perhaps the campaign I'm most proud of is a campaign for Jägermeister, who's our client globally. And Jägermeister has been, a brand that's been built on the night, effectively. Whether that's in terms of the people that basically create nightlife and the people who enjoy it. And of course, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that as we went into lockdown, that was effectively stopped suddenly. So you've got on one hand an audience of people who have lost their livelihoods, and at the same time you've got an audience of people who are stuck at home. And Jägermeister's mission is about creating the best nights of your life. So actually for us, with the client, that very quickly turned into a very, very important brief as to how we could actually facilitate that idea of best nights of your life. So this is really about, and this is probably the trend, is really about activating brand purpose. So really, really doing, not just saying. So what we did for Jägermeister was we created a campaign called Save the Night. We had a lot of the bigger groups, so Diageo's, the Bacardis of this world, just basically signing big checks. We wanted to, Jägermeister is a family-owned brand. We wanted to do something that was much closer to that community and really delivered a tangible benefit. So the first thing we launched was a campaign called Meister Drop-ins. So Jägermeister has a network of talent around the world, influencers, and they were suffering. We also knew we had this audience who had nothing to do. So rather than ask our audience to come to us, what we did was create this digital platform which allowed you to effectively book talent wherever you were, to drop into your Zoom calls, to your Teams calls, to your Skype calls. So whether that's mixologists, whether that's graffiti artists, whether that's DJs, singers, you could basically, there's now over 200 Meisters on the platform that you can just book for free to drop into your party. So for going back to my point about value, that was a clear, tangible value, not only to the people who had that talent come into their world, create that great night, but Jägermeister paid the Meisters. So suddenly you've got a revenue stream, an income stream for those Meisters. We also created a PayPal donation mechanism. So if you'd had a mixologist drop into your party, you could also, everyone on that party could go and donate straight to them to tip them effectively. So I think, that's a great example. And to your point about long term, Andrew, I think what we've been really keen to do with Jägermeister is to ensure that that doesn't just stop, and obviously things haven't really changed. We're still a lot of the world in lockdown, so we're continuing a lot of that core activity. But what we're looking at now is actually what's the evolution of Save the Night? How does that grow into the future? What's the bigger cause? How can we continue to deliver value back to that audience or to those audiences? So for me, I think that's, and again, this is about more than just AV. This is actually about a full digital virtual experience. But there are multiple facets to that campaign, which, have all been rooted in that one thing, which was really giving back to that audience and really delivering that value.
That's a fantastic example. And just before I go on to Mark to ask for his, brand that he thinks is doing well, or brands, how did that idea evolve? Where did it come from? Was it a client brief? Was it you going actively to them to say, look, here's a great idea? Just tell us a little bit about that.
It was, quickly is the answer. It was the second week of lockdown. We were quite lucky actually with the Jägermeister relationship, because the guys are based in Wolfenbüttel in Germany. We've always had a relatively long distance relationship. Right. Obviously we meet face to face, but we're very used to working remotely together as a team. And I can't stress how important that was, because there was no sudden change in the way we had to operate. That was just the way we operate anyway. We've worked with the Jägermeister team for a couple of years, so there's already that relationship and that trust. I think in terms of, was there a 2-page written brief from the client? No. Was there a Zoom call where we sat and discussed, the importance of actually delivering against our brand purpose? Yes. But then what was really interesting was, even having said that about the way we've historically worked, the speed at which we got to the idea, the willingness there was from a client perspective to perhaps be a little bit less demanding on us into how that idea was, how formed it was. It was very much an initial thought. The speed at which it got to the CEO, obviously in a family-owned company, it is a bit easier because you can jump over many, many layers of bureaucracy. And then the speed at which it was signed off, we had a demo, we had a beta website live within about 7 days of actually presenting the idea. Which again, you know, we're lucky that we have that capability through our integrated offering in house. So yeah, it was, and then it was live probably 4 weeks later. So globally, with probably about 6 markets, and there's now 25 markets live on the platform. That's it was definitely a great example of, to Nina's point earlier, that agility. But I think what's interesting is how quickly, and this isn't true of Jägermeister, I'm pleased to say, how quickly clients then start to revert back to old ways of working, where suddenly there's layers of bureaucracy, of reviews, of glossy PowerPoint presentations suddenly come back to the fore again. So again, it's that you almost don't want to, that's my point about thinking about the audience. It's that muscle memory thing, isn't it? You know, it's very easy to revert to muscle memory.
Of course, yeah.
It's about just thinking about the brand, or it's about thinking about the way you always do things.
Exactly, and I think one of the biggest things you said there was trust. You know, I think the more that people trust each other, the more they'll do with each other, and you know, that doesn't come overnight. You've got to build that in terms of your relationships. So Mark, what about you? Is there any brands that have stood out in this period in terms of their creativity?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a few, but I think everybody kind of knows the brew dogs creating hand sanitizer, that kind of thing. I think is really good. I think. For me, it's going back to something I think Gina mentioned about the kind of the authenticity, and it's brands who are being really authentic at the minute, and that's authenticity is something that the audiences, I think we've all said this really, you know, at the moment audiences and just people in general have changed almost to no return. People have changed their mentality, they've changed the way they live, the way they work, everything has changed, the world's changed basically, and people have got more control, or a sense of control over their own time, their own agendas. They don't need to be on the train for an hour. They don't need to do X, Y, and Z. They can actually go to those yoga classes or go to those late night language classes, whatever it is. So people have got more control over what they do and how they spend their time. And so going back to something that was said right at the beginning, I think it's all about capturing that audience and creating real authenticity. And whatever you do, it has to be authentic. I mean, the one thing that stands in my head, it's not necessarily the most creative piece of content, but during lockdown, I remember Tesco's was one of the first adverts to come out and kind of say, right, this is social distancing. When you go to your shop, this is what to expect. There's going to be a spot here, a spot there. People are going to be wearing masks. You need to do this. That straight away for me was like, right, Tesco, well done. I love that because you're not trying to sell me anything. You're just trying to tell me how this strange world is going to happen. When I suddenly walk out my door, what am I allowed to do? What am I not allowed to do? And they just made it really clear. So I thought that really kind of stood out.
That's great. I mean,
there's lots of things. What else? I mean, one brand, I know it's really, really old at the minute, but I still talk about it because I thought it was brilliant. The way Burberry did their acoustic sessions. So they did a series of acoustic sessions online, featuring up and coming British artists. And I thought that was absolutely fantastic because at the time they were they were coming out of a stage where they were renowned for football hooliganism and kind of into that thing. But then, you know, there was fantastic acts on there. Dan Kroll, Jake Bugg, James Bay, Paloma Faith, all these amazing acoustic sessions that were on for Burberry. And it kind of almost just changed their brand totally. They weren't pushing product or anything. It was just pure branding content, really well done, really well shot.
Sure.
And so I think it's great. Authenticity, really.
Cool. Okay, guys. I think we've got a couple of minutes left, so let's end on what are your thoughts on the future trend, the future of what branded content is going to look like in the next sort of 12 to 18 months? So a really easy, simple question. So just give us your views in terms of what are you thinking about the future. So Nina, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think we're going to see brands testing out new formats, playing around with storytelling, and just being a bit more creative and daring, and perhaps a bit more brave. The whole idea of brave brands, I think, is a concept we should be discussing and framing. I think you're going to see more brave brands, but also perhaps people taking more chances, creating new kinds of and maybe quicker decision making, as you said, Dave. So hopefully, I think COVID-19 is, because the audience sentiment is changing, I think also the brands feel liberated to try out new things.
Okay, great. And just Gina?
I think two things. Definitely from our perspective, they're going to be moving more to content experiences, as opposed to pure content, in the way we were talking about. There's been massive digital transformation of a lot of what we do for our clients, and it's only just going to increase, obviously, in the current climate. But I also think from a diversity perspective, that's going to loom large for lots and lots of our clients. Obviously, the Black Lives Matter movement over the summer has just changed perspectives of pretty much all of our clients and everyone within our agency. So we're re-looking at everything we produce now. We're running workshops where, we're really trying to change our mindset and our kind of staff makeup as well, to ensure that we have kind of different perspectives in terms of what we're producing. And I think that's just going to increase in the coming year, particularly.
Great. And Mark?
Yeah, off the back of that, I think creating experiences. I think live, we do a lot of live TV adverts, a lot of live content. I think that's going to come pretty strong. It's the one thing that can bring people together and give people a kind of collective, or a sense of collective experience. And I think it makes people feel like that feeling of exclusivity. I was there when that happened, that in that one moment. So I think live is quite strong. AFP I've mentioned before. I think that's good, and just general, authenticity, really.
And Dave, the final word from Dave.
Final word. I think probably, and I think it's been touched on by Gina. I think it's probably for me about the convergence of what would it be? Probably 4 industries. So experiential content, traditional AV production, and event production. Because I think ultimately, suddenly you're going to see those people and those organisations and skill sets needing to come together. To really deliver a new type of experience, which is rooted in content, but requires those skill sets, whether they be technical or creative, of what a great human experience is. So I think we're already starting to see that through the work we're doing for a lot of clients. Jägermeister is a good example, but certainly I think that's going to be fascinating, because obviously experiential is going through, probably the hardest time at the moment out of all the sort of creative industries. So certainly, what can we do together? When we bring those skill sets together, it's going to be fascinating in the next, even in the run to Christmas. Christmas is going to be an amazing time to see actually what that looks like. What can brands deliver as experiences?
Thank you, guys. I think really the key there is it's agility, it's flexibility, it's collaboration, it's listening to what our audience wants. All these things deliver value, and all these things are done through our creative thinking, which is great. And it is about taking that longer term view. It is about, working together to ensure that we can deliver that return on investment and show that effectiveness. And, I think it's really important that we keep doing that. And I just want to end by thanking you all. So thank you, Nina, Gina, Mark, and Dave, for giving us your perspective from your sectors and your industries. And I think it's been really fascinating, some brilliant insights, and hopefully we'll keep the conversation going, and do lots of great work, and keep on doing that. So thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.